G'day, welcome back. I'm sorry that I missed my episode on Tuesday. Australia Day got a little bit rowdy and we were outside playing cricket and having beers till about 9 p.m. So there wasn't much time to film. In today's episode, we're going to get into protests, Pauline, and it was probably a terrorist. All that and more on the Mark Pirotta Show.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Blaster! Welcome to the Mark Pirotta Show.
Sharing clips is going to look a little bit different for a while until I figure out a solution to the fact that every single time I share a video, the screen record for some reason is about a second off the voice, and it's becoming really irritating and it's almost impossible to fix it because I can't fix it in the edit where it looks just fine. I somehow have to just guess how much the difference is going to be and try and pull the audio forward. And every time I do that, it kind of just makes it worse. So until I figure out a solution, we'll be sharing some clips, but the clips that I'll be sharing will just be overlaid with an image. So you don't have to sit there and lose your mind watching the mouth move differently to the words that are coming out. So forgive me until I can figure out a solution for that. In saying all of that, we do have to share a clip straight off the bat. 3.8%. The inflation rate has gone up again to the predicted number from last month's release. Jim Chalmers came out and gave us one of the greatest spiels of all time. And much like terror in Bondi, the criminal, the person who is perpetrating all of this terrible stain upon the Australian society is, of course, right-wing extremists. Watch.
Oh, look, I've got more important numbers to focus on, like the numbers which have been released today. I mean, I understand that when we're seeing the disintegration of the far right in Australian politics, that's of interest to political junkies and politics watchers and commentators. I understand that. But my focus is really the inflation numbers, the housing data, the numbers in the budget. What we're seeing now in the former coalition, it's really descending into farce when you look at the behaviour of coalition members, including, earlier today. We've got one fella from north of here. He's gone from telling everyone he wants to leave the National Party, and now today he says he wants to lead it. So the National Party, the Liberal Party, the far right of Australian politics is really descending into farce. It's a kind of a bin fire of far right personality politics. And I want to assure the Australian people that even with the disintegration of the coalition, even with their kind of unedifying attempts to just try and be a paler shade of orange, the government's very focused on the cost of living, on housing, on our economic challenges, and we won't be distracted by the bin fire, which is the former coalition.
Well, that's an interesting way to answer a question about the fact that your government is currently a dumpster fire when it comes to the economy, when it comes to social cohesion, when it comes to immigration. We have never seen a government fail this spectacularly and then try and shift the goalposts to the opposition at a time where the opposition is basically just infighting. Now, I understand the political rhetoric when it comes to this sort of thing where don't focus on me, focus on those guys over there who effectively have no say and are being bullied into policies that are terrible by your government, which are just making things worse. But at the end of the day, your job is to do what you said right at the end there. Focus on making life affordable and good for Australians. But instead of doing that, on Australia Day, we welcomed almost 19,000 new Australian citizens into this country. Now, it's difficult to look at someone and know exactly what their value set is, but given the current track record of this Labor government, it stands to reason that we would assume that they are not people who would be congruent with our society. The day before Australia Day, and on Australia Day, we had more Labor and Green politicians posting about Indian Independence Day than we did about actual Australia Day, on Australia Day. The numbers as they lie are effectively 60% of Labor MPs did not post anything about Australia Day or posted something simply about Invasion Day. The remainder of the 40% posted quite literally nothing, with maybe the exception of about 10% who still have a backbone to actually love this nation. Now, I've been thinking long and hard about these protests and what they mean, and the humorous part about it is that the two protests that were sort of happening simultaneously, the Invasion Day protest and the anti-immigration / Australia Day protests, effectively had the same message. It was anti-invasion. The Australia Day protest from the right wing of politics was effectively saying, stop forcing us to have all of these immigrants coming into our nation when we can barely support the people who are here right now. When the economic prospects for our children look so dire, stop bringing in people who have their own children right now who are going to start destroying the social cohesion and sucking off the teat of the Australian taxpayer. The people on the Invasion Day part were like, well, you guys that are already here, who have been here for about 240 odd years, you guys shouldn't be here and you shouldn't be happy about the fact that you are here because you invaded us 240 years ago. That's the humorous aspect. The not so humorous aspect is this. The Invasion Day protest had probably about 10 times more people than the Australia Day rally. And the media made a big kerfuffle about it. Everyone was up in arms. They were saying, oh, look at this. There are 10 times more people at the Invasion Day rally. There must be more people who want to abolish Australia Day. But every single poll that has come out says the exact opposite. Every single poll that has come out says that 76% to about 60% of Australians want to maintain Australia Day as it is today. On the 26th of January, commemorating the day that we planted the flag at Sydney Cove. Now, what is interesting is that there were people on the streets who were asking questions to people saying, oh, what are you protesting against? And the reply was, oh, when Australians or when the British landed on Australian soil. For one, it wasn't Australian soil. But for two, it wasn't the day that we landed on Australia. The day that we landed on Australia was when we landed in Botany Bay. The 26th was when we landed in Sydney Cove. When you ask people about what they're actually protesting against and why, the general terms are, we're protesting against genocide. Genocide never happened in Australia. Ever. Oh, we're protesting about the stolen generation. Well, I mean, that was 200 years after, or 150 years after, the day that we're celebrating. Oh, we're protesting against the fact that Indigenous populations were massacred in this nation. There are approximately twice as many Indigenous people in Australia today as there were before the British landed in Australia. So what are you protesting against? Now, for a very long time, we were told that we had to change the date, that it's simply because the 26th of January is just too dark of a day to celebrate for the Indigenous populations of Australia. But this year, the majority message was completely different. The majority message was the message that was always the message, which is to abolish Australia Day. Because abolishing Australia Day is the only logical conclusion to that thinking. Because any day that Australians celebrate their own identity is a day that Indigenous people and grievance politicians will jump at to actually state, how dare you be happy about the fact that you're in this country. There was never going to be a different date that wouldn't be protested against. It was always abolish your national pride. How dare you be happy about who you are and where you are as a people. And the change of the date was just the soft end of the ultimate conclusion, which was the abolishment of our national pride. Now, it's an interesting thought process for a group of people who pretend as though Australia has no culture. What is culture? That's really the question. When you really knuckle down to it, why is it that we're constantly told that Australia has no culture? And to me, it's something pretty simple. Australia doesn't have a discernible culture for two main reasons. Number one, culture is the byproduct of a third-party view on someone else's way of life. And number two, every single one of the people in this nation are living the Australian way of life. Every person who marched in the street was partaking in Australian culture. Australian culture is about freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of expression. The ability to march in the street against your democratically elected elders and leaders. We are speaking about the culture, the way of life that exists within this nation today. So it is an interesting irony that every single person who marched, no matter whether you were there for the March of Australia or whether you were there for Invasion Day marches, you are partaking in what is currently the Australian way of life, the democracy that you are able to flourish in. No other society, structure, or political movement on earth allows you to do this. That is the Western values of a British colony, imparted through Christian doctrine and the idea of common law. You all partook in Australian culture, whether you liked it or not. Now, on the numbers point, that's an interesting idea. How many people on a day of mourning go out and scream on the streets? How many people do you know, after their loved one has passed away, on a day of memorializing one of the hardest days in your own life, would go out into the streets and scream to the heavens, partake in an event that is effectively riddled with its own incitement to hatred? I know no one. In fact, what most people would do was what the majority of Australians did. The majority of Australians who were not at the marches and the rallies because they were at the barbecue. The 40 or 50 people that we had at my place, all just tucked up in the cul-de-sac, cricket going on one end, barbecue in the middle, everyone brings meat to a shared plate. We all share, we converse, we have a drink, and we enjoy ourselves. That's what the majority of Australia was doing on Australia Day. The stuff that doesn't get media attention because it's not clickbaity enough. Watching a rally of about 10,000 people walk through the streets of Sydney screaming "Abolish Australia Day." Now that's a headline grabber. But it's not a representation of the truth of what happened on Australia Day. Because you could go for a drive on Australia Day and every third cul-de-sac would have been doing the same thing. There were fireworks going off up until about 10 p.m. Australia Day is not celebrated through marches and rallies. Now, if that's what you want to go and do with your day, enjoy the God-given freedoms that are imparted to you by this nation that you pretend that you do not partake in. But at the end of the day, if you really want to enjoy yourself, put the barbecue on the front lawn, grab a cricket set, grab a soccer ball, whatever sport you partake in. Everyone bring a six-pack, sit down, have a chat, and enjoy your day. Stop pretending as though you are still grieving for a society that was never going to succeed in the same way that you are succeeding today. Unfortunately, making these sorts of little please do's is kind of essential. I enjoy doing it just for the fun of it, but at the same time, if you want to get a message out, you need the people in your community to just comment, like, subscribe, all of the normal jargon, right? Please just take a moment and give me a hand. We need to create a culture of commentary together. And I love the messages coming in my DMs. Put it in the comments section so that everyone else can see it too. Thank you. Now, the optics. We saw two very diverse situations on both sides of these protests. On the right wing of politics, we saw a neo-Nazi jump on stage and effectively say to the entire crowd, it's all the Jews' fault. Why are we bringing in Jews? Why do we let the Jews do what they do? How dare the Jews exist? It was vile. It was terrible. He was arrested under the new hate speech laws. I don't know if he's still being detained. I'd say he probably is. But it was vile. I don't think he should be arrested for it. I don't think anyone in the crowd should have been clapping for it. Because at the end of the day, that sort of speech isn't something that is, in theory, really inciting hatred. the people who are clapping in the crowd are probably the people who already agreed with that sentiment. In another ironic twist, and this is something else I've been thinking about, the idea of inciting hatred. What is that? What is it about? What is it that actually incites hatred for another group of people? It is very rarely the pompous, unified, silly speech of a group of people who agree with each other. In fact, the only people who generally have hatred incited upon them in that sort of scenario are the people who are speaking. In the same way, if you wanted to incite hatred against Indigenous Australia in this country, you do what this guy did. You burn the Australian flag. Watch.
To bring their big boat through, to mess with all of the ecosystem of the stomach.
Yes. Because this, in and of itself, while it might be hate speech in its own way through a physical action, is more than likely going to be the thing that incites hatred against Indigenous Australia the most. Now, just saying vile things about a group of people or just saying a bad thing about a subset of Australian society, that might be hate speech. But if you really want to know who gets violence incited against them when they say something terrible or when they do something terrible, it is the person and the people who that person is associated with who have hatred incited against them. If you want to know what the greatest incitement to hatred was from the entire set of rallies that happened, it was this bloke. It was the women who came and stomped on the Australian flag after it was burnt. It was the people who came and spat on the Australian flag. They just incited hatred against all of Indigenous Australia. Because what their actions represent is effectively an us versus them mentality. It is a mentality that if you believe in this ideology of Australia that gives you the freedom to hold this rally, speak into the microphone that you're speaking into, then we hate you. We want to burn you, we want to stomp on you, and we want to spit on you. And so obviously as a consequence, the people who feel that they are represented by that flag are incited to hate you as a consequence. It's this reverse psychology of how this actually works. Hate speech makes you hated. It doesn't make anyone hate anyone else. The people who agree with you are sitting there cheering while this is going on. They aren't incited to hatred while you do this horrendous action. The people who are on the other side of that issue, listening to your hate speech, they now hate you and what you represent. So congratulations for inciting hatred against your own people. The only person with half a brain in all of this has been Kangaroo Jack. I love listening to his posts. He goes on a ramble sometimes. But honestly, he's one of the only logical people left inside of this entire movement. His idea is not abolish Australia. It's let's find a way to come together and come together under one flag. Now, on the right wing of politics, I'm probably unique in this that I'm not beholden to the idea that the Union Jack needs to remain on our flag. I see no consequence to removing it if we improve it by solidifying the Australian identity under a new flag outside of British control. That to me is about the most Australian thing that you can do. This is vile. And you've just incited hatred against the entire Indigenous Australian community. So congratulations to you and all the 10, 12,000, I'm going to call it 6,000 because probably half of the people who were there were actually just paid pro-Palestine agitators. But the final story we'll get into today is about the bomb that didn't happen. The bomb that has not been spoken about, and the bomb which ideologically is no different to Bondi. Because at the Perth Invasion Day rally, a bomb was thrown into the crowd, which, thank the Lord, did not go off. This was a frag bomb filled with metal, chemicals, shrapnel. If this thing had gone off, it would have been a mass casualty event, the likes of which we have not seen on Australian soil. It would have made Bondi look like a play school brawl. And somehow, the Australian people have seen and heard barely anything about this. Somehow, the lunatic who did this got a gag order to suppress his name and his identity from the court. How on earth is that allowed? Now, I don't know who this person is. I don't know if he's white. I don't know if he's Arab. I don't know if he's Indigenous. I'll say that the evidence leans to the fact that he's not a white man. Because if it was a white man, chances are we would have already seen his face and known his identity within 15 minutes of this thing happening. Because people on the ground would have had their cell phones on and they probably would have got snapshots of him and his face would be everywhere, just like we saw Tom Silvani's face everywhere despite the gag order on his case. And so the evidence points to the fact that this is not actually a white man, but in any case, it is a terrorist event. And this man was not charged under terror law. This man was charged with intent not to kill, not to murder, but to cause harm. What on earth is going on here? This has to have deeper roots. This can't just be a know nothing, do nothing. It's either a psyop and a plant where the bomb was never going to go off and it was just sort of something to say, hey, you know, the white people have something to yell about. Let's plant a fake bomb and throw a fake bomb into the crowd and pretend as though it's the real deal and charge this guy with almost nothing. And, you know, maybe his kids or his family gets like 50 grand as a consequence just to make the movement a little bit stronger. I doubt it, but that's probably the conspiracy angle. But more than likely what we are seeing is a consequence of the failure of the political response from the Albanese government. It goes all the way from the top, from Albanese and Chalmers and their failed bid to improve the economy, reduce the cost of living to improve Australian society, all the way down to their favourite line, which is social cohesion. Now, on a positive note, the majority of the protests were very peaceful. There were times where Australia Day protesters were walking through Indigenous Invasion Day protests and they were beaten up because they were wearing the Australian flag and their flag was taken off them. They had paint thrown on them. There were some instances, but it was very, very minor. Compared to what we see over in America, it was nothing. It's child's play. I am actually happy with the fact that it was a mostly peaceful event. In rhetoric, no. Obviously not. We are speaking about important topics, dangerous topics, topics that could shake the social fabric of the way that we live here in Australia, from immigration all the way to the inception of this nation. And so things that are said are going to be vitriolic as a consequence, because these are the two sides of Australian politics. These are the two, I won't even say extremes, because they're sort of the center extremes. Like there are certain people who are a little bit more hectic on either side, as we saw the neo-Nazi on one end and the people who burned the flag on the other. I would say the scale probably leans left a little bit more than it leans right at the moment when it comes to extremist ideology, if we're being very serious, just on pure numbers. But it's good to see that these people could have such opposing ideas and not resort to actual violence, because that's what we need. We need to return to a situation where you can actually speak and have completely opposing ideas and have that disagreement in a way that leaves both of you at the end of it feeling like you won and you lost. You were able to make some concessions on certain portions of the conversation, but you also stood firm on other portions, and both of you came away learning more information and hungry to go learn more about the other so that you can destroy them in the next debate. And in our final bit of news, we'll just get to Pauline very briefly. Now, Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party's polling has gone through the roof once again. What I find very interesting, and you guys can go look at these stats yourselves, the largest group of voters who are swinging towards Pauline Hanson, you would think, considering the fact that she is more on the right wing of politics, you would think it would be white men, basically. But as it turns out, men are not swinging to Pauline nearly as much as women. More women than not are now intending on voting for Pauline Hanson. If you want to know why her numbers are pumping up so much, it's because the average Australian woman no longer feels safe in this country. It's because the average Australian woman cannot happily stay at home and raise her own children. Go and look at Pauline Hanson's policies. She intends on diversifying the childcare subsidy to ensure that mothers who want to stay home with their children can. If there is a policy that can win votes in this country, it's that one. Look at the policies that she's proposing when it comes to energy, the reduction in costs when it comes to the electricity that we all spend our money on instead of going on that family holiday. Go look at the policies that she's proposing when it comes to immigration. It's not a full stop. It is a moratorium and a net negative migration policy. That is to say that we intend on ensuring that Australians get the go first. Let us catch up. Let the economy catch up. Let our public services catch up. Let our housing catch up. Don't flood what is already flooded. You don't bring a hose to a flood. Okay? Her policies are common sense. She is now pushing in 150 of the electorates, brand new candidates. And she's not picking them herself. She's putting it out to open polling. So this is put your name up, put your hand up, go out there and show me that you're part of the community. Show me that you've done things for the community and not just for yourself. And then you're going to be picked, not by me, but by the people of your electorate. Pauline Hanson's policy is pushing into the next election. And mind you, there's still more than 18 months left until the next election. There's plenty of time. This political movement is growing in a way that no political movement has grown since reform. Pauline Hanson can win the next election. As I've said before, I do not think that she will ever be Prime Minister because I don't think that she will want to personally contest in the lower house. It also makes no sense for her to contest in the lower house. But if she can fill seats in 150 electorates with good candidates who are attractive, both physically, mentally, morally, from a family perspective, she's going to build what will be the conservative movement for the next generation. And the thing that I see happening, which I find terrifying to think, is that the Liberals and the Nationals, if One Nation cannot coalesce with them, is that they will coalesce with Labor if it comes to a point where in order to make government, the Liberals and the Nationals have to pick between One Nation and Labor, that the Nationals and the Liberals will pick Labor. Because One Nation getting into power will be oligarchy breaking. It will be earth shattering. And I don't necessarily think, if I'm being super honest, that it would be a good 3 years. I think that Australia is going to see the corruption that has taken place for the last 25 years. Effectively, since the end of John Howard's term till now, I don't see anything other than corruption during that time period. And so if One Nation gets in there and exposes all the things that have gone wrong, the bloat in the government, they won't be popular. They're going to be hated. And so I do fear that the Liberals will side with Labor. And if that happens, it'd be a dark day in Australian politics. But first, what you have to do is if you know someone who would be a great candidate for your local seat, name them. Drop them in my comments. And I've got something going with One Nation at the moment. Let's just put it that way. It's not like I'm part of the main organization just yet, but I do have ties in with certain portions of One Nation. And as such, Drop their name in the comments. If there's someone that you know in your local electorate who would do a great job representing this country under Pauline Hanson's One Nation, drop them in the comments and I'll see what we can do. We have an opportunity to really unite this country under one common cause, just making the place awesome for everyone in the best way that we can. Let's get rid of the protests. Let's pump up Pauline. And let's get rid of these probably, definitely, more than likely terrorists. That'll do us for the show today. I'm 99% sure I'll get an episode out on Saturday. Things are going to be shifting quite dramatically. I'm going to try to do some more short form content. That's my plan at the moment. And I'm going to spend the next week or so really focusing in on my book, which I hope to get out in about a month and a half, 2 months' time. I'm a little bit delayed. I apologize. Once again, I'm sorry I missed a show on Tuesday, but I will speak with you guys on Saturday, even if it's just for a short 10 minutes. And that's it. My name is Mark Pirotta, and this is the Mark Pirotta Show. God bless.